Ja. On the edge of the Arabian Gulf, rising straight out of the superheated sands of Dubai Marina, stands a structure so impossibly slender it defies belief. 450 meters tall, barely 30 meters wide. A hyper-luxury monolith piercing the desert sky, visible from the Palm Jumeirah to the depths of downtown, the thinnest megatall residential tower on Earth. From certain angles, the blinding desert sun makes its glass facade disappear entirely. From others, it cuts through the heat haze with a brutalism that shames the opulent towers around it. But when the Shamal winds blow off the Gulf, it moves. Not a metaphorical flex. A violent, physical sway of up to 90 centimeters in either direction. This is a motion the multi-millionaire residents feel in their bones. Elevators grind to a screeching halt. The structural glass groans under immense thermal and wind stress. And when a disposal bag is dropped down the chute from the 90th floor, the impact sounds like a detonation echoing through the core. This is the reality of life inside Dubai's ultimate billionaire culture vertical enclave. This tower represents what happens when real estate ambition collides head-on with the absolute limits of physics, and when the critical gap between an engineering, computer model and actual construction turns out to be a multi-million-dollar nightmare. Sold to wealthy global expats as the pinnacle of elite Gulf living, it is now a swaying, creaking monument to architectural hubris. Built on reclaimed land that is shifting, subjected to extreme 50-degree summer expansion, and plagued by systematic failures. The building is trapped in a structural crisis. This is the story of how Dubai's most exclusive address became an engineering trap that cannot be stabilized without dismantling the very systems that hold it together. And the crisis is escalating right now. The blueprint for this architectural anomaly didn't originate from standard Gulf engineering. It began when a prominent developer and a celebrity architect looked at a minimalist, perfectly square grid design and asked a dangerous question. What if we build this to 450 meters on the Dubai waterfront? The answer forced structural engineers into uncharted territory. The tower's slenderness ratio, height divided by width, stretches to an unprecedented 15:1. In modern skyscraper design, an 8:1 ratio is considered aggressive. 10:1 requires highly specialized structural solutions. But 15:1? At that scale, the wind tunnel tests came back with results so alarming that engineers had to invent an entirely new structural strategy to prevent the tower from snapping when fierce Shamal winds hit a hyper-slender square building. The air doesn't flow smoothly. It shears off the sharp corners, creating alternating vortices, spinning columns of low pressure that detach in a rhythmic pattern, first left, then right. This phenomenon, vortex shedding, exerts a massive lateral, rhythmic push and pull on the structure. At this specific width, and at the high wind velocities roaring off the Gulf over 400 meters up, the vortex frequency perfectly matches the tower's own natural oscillation frequency. The result is resonance. The sway isn't random. It organizes, builds, and amplifies. To fight this, engineers designed two primary countermeasures. First, open blow-through mechanical floors placed at regular intervals to break up the wind pattern. The theory was simple. Let the wind pass straight through the building to destroy the low-pressure vortices before they could organize. Second, the largest tuned mass damper system ever integrated into a Gulf residential project. Massive counterweights designed to swing counter to the building's movement and neutralize the sway. On paper, the calculations worked perfectly. But paper doesn't account for the reality of a working luxury tower. During construction, those open blow-through floors were packed with heavy mechanical equipment, cooling chillers, structural brackets, and thick security handrails. The wind tunnel models assumed completely unobstructed, empty space. The actual building, however, presented a solid block of obstructions. The wind couldn't pass through freely. Instead, it slammed into the equipment, generating the exact destructive vortex resonance the design was supposed to prevent. The discrepancy between the digital wind tunnel models and the physical reality in Dubai Marina quickly triggered a chain reaction of structural failures. Because the blow-through floors were choked with mechanical gear, the wind loads didn't dissipate. Instead, the force transferred directly into the building's frame. Heavy steel handrails and equipment brackets on the mechanical levels began failing from severe metal fatigue, the direct result of absorbing intense, repetitive aerodynamic forces they were never meant to hold. With the wind bypass strategy compromised, the burden shifted entirely to the tuned mass dampers. The massive counterweights were forced to work around the clock, fighting excessive oscillations that far exceeded their original design parameters. As the tower swayed beyond its planned thresholds, the internal stresses rippled through the vertical infrastructure. But the wind was only half the problem. In Dubai, engineering must contend with an environment that is brutally hostile. When summer temperatures soar toward 50 degrees Celsius, the exterior glass and aluminum facade undergoes massive thermal expansion. Meanwhile, the interior concrete core is kept freezing by powerful industrial HVAC systems. This extreme temperature differential creates immense structural shearing forces. The glass fatigue is relentless. Deep within the core, the structural walls groan and creak as the building tries to expand outward, while being held tightly by its internal skeletal framework. Worse still is the foundation. Unlike traditional skyscrapers anchored into solid bedrock, towers on the Dubai coast rest on a complex network of friction piles driven deep into hyper-dense sand and reclaimed coastal earth. When a hyper-slender tower sways up to 90 centimeters at the top, it exerts a colossal leverage effect on its base. This constant rocking motion, combined with the shifting nature of reclaimed land, creates a terrifying dynamic. The immense structural weight, coupled with the relentless cycling of the wind, began causing micro-shifts in the foundation pad. On paper, it was a static monolith. In reality, the tower was a dynamic, overstressed machine fighting a losing battle against the wind, the desert heat, and the very ground it was built upon. Inside the tower, the engineering failures quickly translated into a living nightmare for the ultra-wealthy expats who bought into the dream of elite marina living. Wealthy European tech founders, British hedge fund managers, and Gulf investors who poured millions of dollars into these sky residences found themselves trapped in a multi-million-dollar structural trap. The personal accounts detailed in confidential legal filings paint a chaotic picture. Residents reported being jolted awake in the dead of night by a sickening low-frequency motion. The sway was so severe that water in the infinity-edge bathtubs sloshed over the marble floors. Chandelier fixtures swung like pendulums in the penthouses. Then came the mechanical breakdowns. When the Shamal winds caused the tower to hit its maximum 90-centimeter sway deflection, the internal elevator shafts warped slightly out of alignment. The high-speed elevator cables began to whip and flap violently against the concrete shafts, triggering automatic emergency sensors. The elevators would screech to an immediate halt, trapping residents mid-air or shutting down entirely for days at a time. Multi-millionaires were forced to hike up dozens of flights of stairs in a building where the air conditioning struggled to keep up on the unventilated fire stairs. Music! But the most destructive symptom was the water. As the building flexed and bowed, high-pressure plumbing lines and chilled water pipes on the upper mechanical floors experienced extreme joint stress. The lines ruptured. Millions of gallons of water cascaded down through the luxury units. One British investor, who had completed a $3 million renovation on his 75th floor apartment, watched as a catastrophic pipe failure, 3 floors above, completely gutted his property in less than an hour. The flood wiped out the electrical substations of 4 consecutive floors, taking 2 entire elevator banks out of service for nearly a month. Worse, the extreme internal pressure caused sewage backups. The sound of a simple trash bag dropping down the structural chute from the 85th floor compressed the air inside the unvented pipe so violently that residents across multiple levels reported an explosion-like boom that literally cracked the drywall and their living rooms as word of the structural instability leaked through the expat community. The luxury tower's reputation imploded. Wealthy buyers backed out of pending contracts, forfeiting massive deposits rather than taking ownership of a shifting structure. Insurance premiums for the building skyrocketed by over 300% in just 24 months following a series of $10 million water damage claims. The ultimate symbol of prestige had transformed into an unlivable, depreciating vertical liability. God, the crisis has now moved from the structural core to the legal arena. A coalition of owners has filed a massive multi-million-dollar lawsuit alleging fraud, systemic negligence, and structural concealment. They claim the developers were fully aware of the severe glass fatigue and structural movement, but hid the data behind aggressive marketing campaigns and non-disclosure agreements. But a legal settlement cannot fix the underlying physics. The tower remains locked in its 15-to-1 reality. The structural concrete, subjected to relentless rocking forces and extreme desert heat cycles, is developing widespread microfissures. When engineers recommended applying a thick, flexible protective sealant to stabilize the exterior skin, the proposal was rejected because it would ruin the building's sleek, ultra-reflective aesthetic, the very look that justifies its premium price tag. Today, hundreds of high-end units sit completely empty, dark phantoms on the marina skyline. The tower cannot be stabilized without completely stripping out the mechanical floors to clear the wind channels, a process that would require displacing residents and dismantling the vital climate systems keeping the building habitable. It cannot be rebuilt, and it cannot be ignored. As the sun sets over the Arabian Gulf, the world's thinnest megatall residential tower stands as a stark warning. It is a 450-meter monument to the thin margin between an ambitious architectural rendering and the unyielding laws of physics. High above the desert, the ultra-luxury glass continues to groan, the dampers continue to strain, and Dubai's most exclusive vertical enclave continues to sway silently in the wind.